Welcome to Filmspotting. As far as movie superheroes go, Josh, we were the Superman 78 generation, born about right in between Batman 67 and Burton's 89 Batman.
That's right. Do you think this might come up in our top five, but do you think you saw 78 Superman in the theater?
No, definitely
I
didn't.
probably didn't either.
Yeah, I would have seen it on TV or maybe early HBO in the 80s.
Yeah, might have seen Superman 2 in the theater, though. Might have been
Yeah.
able to pull that off.
I think that's true for me as well. Later in the show, our top 5 Superman movie moments that will hopefully not lean too heavily on Margot Kidder's Lois. We're not making any promises, plus Massacre Theater and more. Radio listeners, you're hearing an edited version of the show. For the full episode, listen at filmspotting.net or wherever you get your podcasts. But first, James Gunn's Superman, which is currently in theaters. Gunn is the super auteur behind the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy and 2021 Suicide Squad, who has been tasked with resurrecting not just one, but a universe of superheroes. His new Superman is the first of the rebranded DCU. So long, and thanks for all the Aquaman DCEU.
When we review a movie here on the show, Adam, sometimes we talk about the notion of being in good hands. It's this understanding that the filmmakers are in command of their story and how to tell it, and that we can feel that assurance as viewers. It can go the other way too, of course, the uneasy sense that the hands are unsteady or maybe even misguided. Let's apply this notion to the new Superman, written and directed by James Gunn, with David Corenswet as the Man of Steel, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, and Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. We know this story well. So the real question going in was related to how it was going to be told. How did they do, Adam? If you're a fan of the film, was there a moment where you had that good hands feeling? The sense that Gunn and his collaborators knew what they were doing, particularly with this iconic pop culture property? Or maybe you're not among the 83% of critics and 93% of audience members over at Rotten Tomatoes who did approve of the film. If not, can you point to a moment when this Superman's hands felt unsteady?
I'm sad to report that I think I'm among the 17% with one Josh Larson. I'm
Are
still
you
searching.
kidding me? Wow.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm going to be the villain too. I'm still searching for that clarifying moment to some extent because my experience with this movie would best be described as wobbly right from the beginning. There's an opening crawl setting up the story, relying on repetition with the number 3. And look, as an occasional writer myself, I love me some repetition. It goes from 3 centuries ago, then to, I think, 3 decades, eventually down to 3 minutes. I guess I forgot how many possible units of time there were. I was half expecting it to continue down to 3 milliseconds. It felt so interminable. But at 3 minutes, we hear that Superman has lost his first ever battle. And my ears perked up. And then Superman falls to the ice with a booming thud, and my eyes opened a little wider. Wait, Superman can lose? And soon we see that there's a Lex Luthor who is smart enough and diabolical enough to beat him. I'm intrigued. Not long after that, we get this Superman's version of the Lois Lane interviewing Superman scene that we got in Superman 78, right? And later, I saw an Instagram video with Brosnahan and Corenswet, and they talked about how they approached it, maybe Gunn as well. They approached it as a stage play, and, I wouldn't have pegged Gunn for that, but it works. She's interrogating him about his decision to get involved in world affairs. The subtext of that scene, though, Josh, is we're in a relationship, but I don't really know who you are, and I'm not sure you're being totally honest with me or yourself. I really like the scene because it's a completely different take on the Lois-Superman relationship. It's a different take on the dynamic of that interview from 78, on the substance of the interview, in large part because this is a very different Superman than Reeves, who wasn't just perfectly gallant and respectful and charming and in control. He was perfect in every way, the Superman, whereas Corenswet's Superman is supremely mortal. He isn't wearing the suit, but he is Superman in that scene, and he's flawed. He's completely disarmed rather than being disarming. This Superman might actually be more gallant and respectful and charming and in control in the scenes where he's pretending to be Clark Kent. Then you've got his adversaries referring to him as the Kryptonian or the alien, dehumanizing him the way illegals are being dehumanized right now in our country, establishing some real-world relevance. 20 to 30 minutes in, I mostly thought, maybe Gunn has got it. And by the end, I mostly thought he didn't have it, which we will discuss. But first, I want to know what you thought.
Yeah, as you alluded to, you do already know, I got a chance to see this early, and so you do already know that I had a very negative reaction to this movie. And I want to work my way through that here because honestly, I feel like I've missed out. I feel on the outs. Not only is it getting a good reception, that's fine. I can deal with being against the grain, but people have found this to be rousing and ennobling, and many critics have written about how this is I didn't know I needed this movie. And so I am saying what I'm about to say, even though I really don't want to. I don't want to squash anyone else's fun. And I do see a bit of what they're talking about there. It is in the performance that you were just describing. This is a very interesting take on Superman that, despite those variations you mentioned, which I'd agree with, I think still the character, this movie wants to believe in this character's initial goodness, heroic sense of justice and what is right and wrong, his kindness. I think that's what those people who have really gone for the movie respond to, and it's there. But to me, it was only there in Corin Sweat's performance and the depiction of Superman, and not only lacking elsewhere, but actively acted against elsewhere. And to go back to, the prompt I offered is, I thought I'm going to look back at my notes. I had a ton of notes on this movie and see if I could detect like where things went wrong for me. And really just to reinforce to myself that I didn't come into this movie wanting to go after it at all. And sure enough, looking at my notes, there's nothing negative really for the first number of pages. There's some dialogue I jotted down, which I usually do when I'm taking notes, some appreciation for Krypto, the super dog. I did have a few complaints about the glaring sun in nearly every shot, as if Gunn wants he wants to blot out that dreary DCEU that no one enjoyed. But eventually I did see this phrase jotted down: selfie girl is lame. And I realized in looking back why that stood out to me. And this probably, I wrote down one of the first shots of Sarah Sampaio as Eve, Lex Luthor's image-obsessed girlfriend. Little did I know after this shot of her taking a selfie during the battle with Superman that we were going to get so many bits about her doing this at silly times or saying dumb things or being clingy. But even with that first appearance, something inside me just said, uh-oh. That it's where I started to doubt the hands that I was feeling positive about, as you were, with that interesting opening in the middle of the narrative and all these things that were intriguing me. And I think it was just this instinct to go for the easy, often mean jokes that I recognized. That's a cheapness that has not worked for me in Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I found them, and again, this is where I'm against the tide here. I found those to be full of cheap violence for humor's sake, cheap emotional manipulation that's often tied to endangering animals. I've made my peace with the fact that maybe the Guardians sensibility is just not for me, okay? This isn't something I carry around with me. I honestly forgot that Gunn had directed Volume 3 of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, they kicked him off at one point, but he got
maybe that's why I was confused. Yeah. So at any rate, the problem this time, Adam, is that this sensibility that I sensed coming from Guardians is not the sensibility for Superman, especially a Superman like this one that wants to double down on the character's care and kindness. And as I said, with Corin Sweat, who I think is quite good here, we get a Superman who is, in addition to those things you described, I think quite corny and very earnest. But his movie, to me, so often is delighting in being callous and cruel. And there is just a disconnect there that audiences seem to be able to get past. But for me, I couldn't. It kept piling on until this was a really, really rough watch for me. And I can talk a little bit more as we get into it about where I saw those distinctions. But overall, that's what didn't work for me when it came to Gunn's Superman.
Yeah, listeners, especially obviously those who really like this movie, can completely discount our points of view if they want, more than they might usually, because you said it. James Gunn's sensibility just doesn't seem to mesh very well with ours. I think you've been a little bit harder on some of his films, including Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But I look back at my ratings of his films and thought about our conversations, and I've never really hated a James Gunn film, but I've never come close to really liking a James Gunn film either. Here I am with Superman, kind of right in the middle, but definitely leaning more towards the negative. And one trap I definitely don't want to fall into, because I definitely don't like it when audience members do this with critics, which is you try to assign some kind of motivation to why a critic feels a certain way. But I almost do wonder, Josh, because I feel it myself. I almost do wonder if some critics, it's just wishful thinking, or on some level, there's just this element of wanting so badly, especially for me, not enjoying something like Jurassic Park or Jurassic World Rebirth. You want to go into Superman, and as someone who loved Superman, and we're going to get to our Superman moments, and it's going to be filled, it's just going to be overloaded with nostalgia. I promise you, not only did I not go into this movie wanting to dislike it, I wanted to love it. So I came in with wishful thinking, and yet, to use your word, I was never roused, even in its clearest attempts to be rousing. And I was certainly never moved, even in its clearest attempts to be moving. And I did see it similarly to you, Josh. And I'm going to use some of the same words maybe, and words that are synonyms, perhaps, though the experience of watching the film may be different, or how it worked on us may be different. But like you, I never could quite reconcile, and this is a problem I've had with Gunn's work as well overall, I never could quite reconcile Gunn's glibness and goofiness with his sadistic streak. That's what you're referring to as the meanness? Even just his attempts to be serious, I could never quite reconcile with the glibness and the goofiness. And it is things like, you said it, the lameness of the recurring bit of Selfie Girl, right? It's the Daily Planet itself and every cast member within the Daily Planet who felt to me, Josh, like they probably had bigger parts on the page and then somehow just ended up being afterthoughts in the movie. Like Wendell Pierce, why did he get cast in this film? Beck Bennett is essentially playing a version of the Steve Carell character from Anchorman. He is cartoon, like a cartoon sports writer or something. And I like Beck Bennett
is out of
Saturday
place,
Night
though.
Live.
You're making a good point. He's out of place with what the other characters are doing. What he's
even
trying
out of place
to do
compared to them. But I don't understand why any of them are in this film or what they're doing in this film. And you do have this wonderful earnestness to Superman. The first word out of his mouth, I believe, in this film is golly.
Yes.
And
great. I love that. I was so when I
too.
saw that.
I know. And then we take all of this silliness, even including the fact that this Superman doesn't just save every single human being who's in any kind of peril whatsoever. He rescues a squirrel that's where Gunn's going with this. Superman's even going to save the life of a squirrel who's about to get crushed. But then we're also going to have Russian roulette and have
come on.
Persons of color get killed, and
Russian roulette as a joke, too, though, Adam. It's not just that it's in there, it's that it's there for a comic punchline.
It sort of feels that way, but then he's going to want a payoff, an emotional payoff late in the film when there's going to be a reference to him, and it feels totally unearned and actually, again, I'll say maybe a little bit sadistic there. And everything about the sequence that follows that, where I think we can say, without getting too heavily into any kind of spoilers, everything that follows in that world, which is truly its own universe, this proto-universe, Josh, where you're using not just that person of color as a prop, but you're using this baby alien as a prop.
Seriously.
It's a baby. It's still a baby. And the movie wants you to regard it as a baby and use it and think of it as something that you're trying to protect as precious. And everything about it still feels at the same time like a cartoon. And so for me, it's not so much like it's a moral or ethical thing. It's more that it makes it so tonally and just dramatically kind of disconnected.
Yeah, inconsistent.
That's the lack of consistency, or the thing that I couldn't reconcile. And if I'm constantly trying to reconcile that throughout the film, then I'm having a tough time getting on board with the film dramatically and narratively. I'm constantly just at conflict with myself and the movie.
I completely agree with you on all those points. And again, defenders of the movie might be saying, come on, these are throwaway scenes. And in a sense they are, but they're building a framework that, again, is antithetical to the framework of kindness that this movie is supposedly about. And I'm just going to add some more that are even more throwaways. But the joke about, in the Fortress of Solitude, Superman has these robot assistants who we meet in a number of scenes and come to have some care for as characters.
Mm-hmm.
There's a throwaway, I think it's meant to be funny, after the Fortress of Solitude has been, I'll go around spoilers, but basically invaded. And there's a shot of one of these robots like repeatedly stabbing itself in the head. And maybe that's not meant to be funny. Maybe I'm misreading it. The point is, I should not be confused. I should not in that moment know, am I supposed to feel bad for, I think number 4 it is, because there's a conversation about how they want names even. Like, am I supposed to feel bad here? Am I supposed to be laughing? Is this slapstick? And I don't know, because I don't know. I rarely know what is sincere in a movie by James Gunn. And I don't want to accuse, when I wrote about this, I made, some reference about, I wonder how he feels about pets. I wish I hadn't written that. It was facetious. It's a parenthetical aside. I don't really think that this is someone who doesn't care about animals. And sure enough, reading I think it was in the New York Times, an interesting piece about Krypto, the CGI dog, and it's based on Gunn's, own rescue dog. So I'm not meaning to be personal on that, but it's the inconsistency tone that does make you wonder just based on what you're seeing on the screen. Let's stick with Krypto, and I'll give you another example. In this, black site prison world where we spend way too much time.
Yes.
Krypto has been kidnapped, and Lex Luthor has forced him to run on a treadmill. Okay?
Yeah. Chasing imaginary squirrels.
This is it, Adam. This is it. Okay? If you want to use Krypto as to move our emotions and to say, no, not Krypto. Look what Lex Luthor is making him do. This is awful. This is cruel. It's not nice to do this to animals. Why does Gunn also include the punchline of the squirrel gag? It's separated. We see Krypto first, and then it's like a visual punchline that he's chasing squirrels. These like a screen projection of squirrels. The squirrels and dogs joke is like, from Up and everywhere else is so common. And so this is a comic beat. And so why are we including both? I don't know that, like you, I'm trying to make a moral equation with either choice, but why are we trying to do both? Why are we trying to rend our heart over Krypto's predicament and then make us laugh at what's happening to him at the same time? To me, I can't reconcile those. And just one more thing, because I want to go back to this idea that this is all supposed to stand apart from Superman. He is the beacon of kindness. Of course, this world around him is going to be awful. There's even some hypocritical elements here, because that sequence you were referencing where he's battling this ginormous kaiju and is trying to save the squirrel, I think there, also trying to save a dog. There's another animal from being squashed by this kaiju's foot. The whole point of that sequence is that he's arguing with the Justice Gang about how he doesn't want to harm this kaiju. He wants to capture it.
Like study it or something.
And study it, and we'll bring it to like a zoo somewhere. And he keeps reprimanding them for being too violent against this kaiju. I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes later, there's a scene of Superman and Lois having a conversation in a high-rise building. You can see outside the window, and behind them, the Justice Gang is in a battle with like a giant space squid, right? And they're hammering the thing, they're lasering the thing, whatever they do. They're screaming at it. Hawkgirl does a lot of screaming. They're screaming at this space squid. And I don't know what happened to Superman's concern, because Lois points it out and he's just like, they got this. It's a joke. It's a gag. The Superman we're supposed to be rooting for just gave a speech about caring for these interstellar creatures. Again, this is a minor thing. It's a throwaway scene. But you add all of these on top of each other, Adam, and I kept sinking lower and lower in my seat.
Right. Yeah. Now, let me push back just slightly on one aspect of this with regard to the meanness. And that is the Lex Luthor that we get here is obviously very clearly intended to be antithetical to the Superman that we get. And we've already painted the picture of this Superman, the guy who says golly and saves the squirrels and for the most part seems to be interested in just wanting to preserve life and cares about every living creature, including, I'll throw one other little touch I like in here that I feel like is a deliberate or intentional moment in the screenplay. Remember when he goes to the Fortress of Solitude after he's been beaten in that opening sequence, and the robot, I think it's number 4 again, does something to help him, and he says, thank you. And the robot says, there's no need to thank me. You know, I can't feel gratitude or feel whatever emotion he should feel in that moment. And I think that Superman probably knows that about the robot, but he can't help but thank him anyway, right?
Right.
That's this Superman. That's what he's made of. This Luthor, and this is ultimately something I like about the movie, I think is a strength about the movie, and I alluded to this earlier. This Lex Luthor is someone who is defined by his meanness in contrast to the kindness of Superman. So you mentioned the joke, potentially, of chasing the squirrel. I see that a little bit more. I see it less as a joke, and I see it more about Lex Luthor being someone who, it's not a matter for him of just wanting to sort of physically hurt the dog, Krypto, or do anything else to him. He wants to traumatize that dog. He wants to hurt and traumatize everybody who is an enemy of him. And I guess I appreciate that the movie gave us a Luthor who is distinct in that way from others. Look, I love Gene Hackman, of course, right? But if you're going to find new spins on these characters in the mythology, that was a Gene Hackman who was an evil genius, and he was someone who certainly caused trouble and almost destroyed parts of the world. I'm not saying he didn't, but compared to this Lex Luthor, I mean, he seems like a saint. This Luthor is someone who comes very close to doing the unthinkable and actually destroying Superman at multiple points in this film, and he relishes every moment of it. He has no qualms whatsoever about hurting anybody who gets in his way, and you don't ever really feel that about someone like Hackman's Luthor.
Yeah, this is a sadistic villain. Absolutely understand that. I think, again, the Krypto scene on the treadmill, I think, is trying to have it both ways. Emphasize that is definitely a part of it, but also getting us to laugh at the squirrels. I don't mean to say that the movie is on the side of this Lex Luthor or even has the spirit of this Lex Luthor. No, but I mean, like, I know that might be what it sounds like. It's clearly able to make a distinction there. But you know what, Adam? There's a key scene here that I think muddies the waters even on this point. And this is when Lois Lane has teamed up with one of the Justice Gang, Mr. Terrific, who I think is quite good, Eddie Gathegi, playing a character I was unfamiliar with, Mr. Terrific. Great character.
He's a standout. For sure.
A standout for sure. I think Brosnahan is really good as Lois Lane as well. I wish she and Corn Sweat had more scenes together. Maybe we'll set that aside and come back to it. But for this scene with Lois and Mr. Terrific, they're basically facing off against a squadron of mercenaries. Okay. So they're, outnumbered. It's tense. Mr. Terrific is able to create these T-spheres, they're called. So he essentially builds this bubble around Lois where she's protected, and then he goes on the attack, unleashing other T-spheres or projectiles, things that start taking out all these mercenaries and the scientists who are working alongside the mercenaries. Okay.
This is a sequence everybody seems to love, by the way. Of course.
Because Gunn is amping up the filmmaking. The camera stays in the sphere with Lois, and it's one of these single takes, which is swerving, following the action as she looks. And I would say it's impressive, except that he also pulls out this trick about 15 times in the movie, sometimes even in conversation scenes. And, at what point does a bravura single take no longer become bravura if you're using it this often? put that aside. To the point here, the experience we have, the experience that Lois has, is she's in her own movie. It's like she's watching her own IMAX movie, and it is putting a safety lens against the violence that is happening. The bubble pops and all she can say is like, wow, or something like we're expected to. Let me add, Gunn also, loves putting in pop songs. So we get this 5 years time playing from Noah and the Whale. I'm not going to try to sing it to you, but it's very exciting, very poppy, adds to the excitement of this moment. And all I can look at is this field of bodies in front of us. Again, I understand it's a superhero movie. It's not real. I understand that people die in them. To me, it is the attitude about the dying. This is where things get fuzzy. This is not Lex Luthor. This is one of the heroes. We have already been told about how much Superman values life. I'm not saying Mr. Terrific can't kill people. What I'm saying
they don't
is
feel the same. They've made that clear. But
why does it have to be presented as the entertaining high point of the film? That is the disconnect.
And why does she seem to love it? Why does she
because
find
we're
it
supposed to. Because we're supposed to, and we're in the bubble with her. I think that may have been the moment where I was pretty much completely out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I had a similar reaction to it where I loved the song. I understood why many people might find this exhilarating, and yet I was conflicted the entire time I was watching it, and I kind of just wanted to get back to Superman. I wanted to get back to the narrative. I wanted to get back to that character the entire time. And as good as Brosnahan is, she's clearly a really talented actress. I wanted more scenes. I'm not saying I wanted scenes exactly like the one in the apartment, but I wanted more scenes where I actually got a sense of her character and her agency. And that may seem like a weird word to use because she drives so much of the action in the second half of the film. But there again, Josh, I didn't buy a lot of it. There is so much made about entering this proto-universe, which is, we're told, incredibly dangerous. And the fact that she just walks into this universe, right? I know that this here is one of those things you may just have to suspend disbelief on. It's not something I'm bringing up because she's a woman. It's something I'm bringing up because she's a human being. She's not a superhero. And the fact that the movie needs her to enter that space, and then when you really think about it, she does not actually do much of anything in the second half of this film. Even after she goes into that universe, she's actually not very involved because she can't be. And as all the action is occurring, she's kind of flying around and doing some journalistic things, but she's not really involved in the action. I feel like she's a pretty hollow character as well. Not as hollow as the other members or the other employees of the Daily Planet, but more hollow than I would have liked. And that brings me as well, Josh, to something about Corin Sweat's Superman that I also struggle with, even though I did overall really like his performance. And there were aspects of his Superman that we've spoken to that I think really work. Challenge, if you will, the conventional mythology of Superman in interesting ways. He's a little slow, right? And I think I'm okay with that. But here's the part I couldn't really forgive. In that interview scene, the thing she keeps hammering him on is that, and the thing the world and that Lex is trying to use against him, the thing the world is questioning is he's in a bunch of trouble because he's stopped a war. He's stopped another country, a very, here again, real world parallels, right? Like Russia invading Ukraine, these two fictional countries, one just deciding it's going to invade. And his answer, because again, he's all about saving human life, the sanctity of human life, his only answer is really, but people were going to die. So I had no choice. People were going to die. I had to step in and stop it. That's who I am. That's what I do. But the notion that this guy, who also is a reporter for the Daily Planet, seems to have never thought about what is Superman's place in the world. I'm not saying like Man of Steel or some of these other films we needed to have trials. We needed to put him on trial and have these lengthy discussions about what Superman's political motivations should be or what's right and wrong along those lines. But the fact that it seems as if, Josh, he's never thought about whether or not it really is okay that he gets involved in these affairs, that he doesn't have conversations with our political leaders before he goes and does these kinds of things. It does seem like a bit of a screenplay miss to me.
I get it. To me, it's embedded in the conception of the character, which is, to a nicer way to put it, is maybe naive or maybe impulsive in his niceness. Above all that, maybe possibly. So yeah, I think you're right to point it out, but it didn't bother me quite as much. I did want to go back once more, just quickly, as you were describing Lois stuck in this. I don't think I wrote this down. Were you saying a proto world, this in between
proto universe? Isn't that what it's called?
Something like that. Yeah, sounds. We may be in trouble getting that wrong, but this dark world. The reason it doesn't resonate, what is going to happen to her here, why it doesn't matter, is because nothing matters, because this is another CGI goop world.
That's the thing.
It is
a hot mess.
And I don't want to keep piling on this movie, but I also, I had other problems than the mean streak. And one is that this thing looks pretty bad, I thought. We'll get to our Superman moments, but I had a chance, obviously, to watch many scenes from 1978 Superman, which looks so much better in terms of special effects, different tools, of course. But then what we get here, there is that entire sequence in that world is, you don't know what is up or down, or what happens if someone falls off this, or if there's like a goop river that, maybe that's bad to fall in.
River, which is why I've been getting it wrong. It's called a pocket universe.
Pocket universe that has a proton river that leads to a black hole that we all know none of it exists, because it doesn't look like it does for a second.
No stakes at all to any of it, because none of it matters. None of it feels remotely real, and you don't know what's going on anyway.
And this happens later too, when a rift, we'll leave it.
Yeah.
But the climactic sequence, let's just say visually, is just as junky.
Yeah.
And you know what? Here's a point, Adam, where I sat up in my seat because I thought, there's a climactic battle where we're punching and bludgeoning and flying and, not all that different from the Snyder stuff, quite frankly. And then Superman and the person he's fighting land in a baseball field. And I saw that turf moved. Like actual, it might have been grass or turf. It was something that either was really well done with CGI, or they actually were on physical material. And I shot to attention because I thought, this is going to be good. I can actually tell where they are, what's around them, and how it affects the fight. And, they don't stay there too long. Obviously, they head back into the dark closet.
There is also the fact that I was praising how I loved that, and I like Holt's performance. I loved how they made Lex so ruthless, so repugnant, so evil. And then they make a choice at the end, or Holt makes a choice at the end with that character that seems so out of sync with the diabolicalness of that character, that attempts to give that character some humanity. And I think, Josh, you and anyone who has seen the movie and has seen the end of the film should know what I'm referring to. And I kind of wanted to laugh watching it, quite frankly.
Yeah, I had a rough time with his characterization, even though I agree the interpretation is as this sadistic guy, but I don't think he got a lot of development beyond that until we're dumped with his villain speech, or a villain speech, I should say, gets dumped on us. Before that, I think Holt was doing a lot of sweating trying to make this work.
Well, the emails are going to come in aplenty.
You have no idea, Adam. You have no idea.
Superman is out in wide release. If you see it, and how about we just say, if you agree with us, email us, feedback@filmspotting.net.
You know what? Our listeners our listeners are like Superman. If they disagree with us, they will be kind. And thoughtful. They will not want to destroy us and rip our spines out. They'll just have thoughtful, intelligent, kind responses. I'm sure of it.
This conversation might be the one that puts them over the top. This turns them into Lex Luthor.
Oh, no.
Again, feedback@filmspotting.net.